In astrology, the moon is the ruler of Cancer and represents our deepest personal needs, our basic habits and reactions. It also represents our unconscious mind. So where the sun acts, it's about action. The moon reacts. It's how do we instinctively react or respond to problems? What do we feel we need for a sense of security? So where the moon is in our charts, it will give us the answer to those questions. The moon is also associated with the mother and with feminine energy in general. And it's both our inner child and our inner mother. So it's responsive, receptive, and reflective. And its function is to help the development of our ability to feel and respond emotionally, and also the development of subjectivity, impressionability, and sensitivity. It's what we would call the development of a soul, of our soul. And when it's dysfunctional, it manifests as self-indulgence, wishy-washiness, timidity, overactive imagination, indecision, moodiness, and things like that. So I will stop here and I will let James take over and go deeper into the study of the moon today.
Thanks,
James. Thank you.
You'll notice that within this course, we're moving from Saturn inwards towards the sun. And as we do that, we're becoming more and more intimately involved. Whereas Saturn was societal and Jupiter was our response to break forward out of society and grow, and Mars was our push into the world, and Venus our relating to the world, Mercury our inner sense of connectedness and therefore perception. So we're moving more and more and more intimately into the self. And here we have the moon, and we become very intimately involved with this energy indeed. You know, you could have a thought and it's kind of might trouble your mind. But if you have a feeling that's troubling you, that there's something a little bit deeper about that in there, you know. The moon is very intimate indeed. And it comes from that beginning of intimacy of the fetus, as it has such intimacy with the mother that it is not different from the mother. It is an aspect of the mother, and eventually becomes so clearly in close relationship with the mother that it begins to understand separation only after about 6 months, you know, or within the first 6 months. So you're talking about moving from very profound intimacy towards individuality during this moon process, which might be likened to how we move from unconsciousness into consciousness. And being conscious is noticing separation, in a sense, in this sense. Now, the moon is the matrix. A matrix is the holding body. It is useful to understand that on a cosmic level, in the stars, shall we say, the moon and the earth might well be decided as actually a twin planet system rather than a planet and a moon. This is discussed within astrophysics. And so, you know, the moon and the earth are very intimately connected indeed. So the physical body is central to understanding the moon. Do you feel comfortable in your body? you know, sometimes actually there are aches and pains and things you can't do that you need to do. And there's this, you know, this absolute absence of feeling okay because your physical body is not comfortable. So the urge we have to make the physical body comfortable, that's a real sense of the energy that we're putting into making the emotional body comfortable as well. So if we think of the whole idea of a matrix as being the container, what we are containing is spirit, basically. And if you think of spirit as the spark, that if you look at a fire that's sparking, the sparks are spontaneous, free, undirected, they just spark. And that's what spirit is like. It's not directed at all. And if you didn't have something to contain it and therefore direct it and shape it, then it would just be impotent, as indeed so many sperms are. And most sperms are a waste of time. One of them gets through and penetrates the egg. So the egg, of course, is the matrix within which the potential life of the sperm can be realized. So let's just hold that thought for a minute. If we hold that thought, we will be enacting a moon-like function. Hold that thought. What happens then? Well, it moves into a different dimension when you hold that thought. Because when we think quickly, and you've got to keep up with my ideas because I'm speaking quickly, as I did last week when I was talking about Mercury, you can't hold any thoughts because you've got to think the next one and the next one. But if I hold that thought, then you'll allow your feelings to be involved in your perceptions. And then you'll perceive differently. So the quality that we're introducing within our studies of being very good listeners, never interrupting, that's a baseline study for this group. This provides the moonlight quality where we all feel safe within this group, because when we say something, we know two things. It will not be interrupted, so we can just relax and speak at our own speed. And it will be not ridiculed, and so we can say whatever we want. This generates the feeling that we have, that this safe space, they call it. So who provided that matrix would be the mothering energy. Somebody who understands the importance of providing safe space when you're discussing deep emotional questions. Well, it's actually me at the very beginning. However, I find it a lot easier for me to get into my masculine role of delivering new ideas if I can share this mothering energy with someone. So a facilitator holds the group sometimes, more often than I do, so that I'm freed from that very particular and important energy that the mother energy is associated with. Now, this translates into a cultural norm in most countries where the mother holds the family, holds the homestead. And I didn't really understand this mystery until my grandmother died. And all of a sudden I realized that nobody could cut bread like her. Nobody could spread food upon a table like her. I felt so loved and safe when I was with her at her table, in a way that I never subsequently felt in my whole life, actually. You know, that's grandmother. I'm sure that's not quite the same way as mother, but it's that energy of I was meant to feel loved and safe and well fed and belonging because she provided that container. And whatever I did, she could look and not like me doing it, but she wouldn't ever stop me doing it. I was safe to do whatever I wanted. And that kind of mothering energy isn't that commonplace. especially in today's hurried world where the mother thing it was made to think that going out and getting a career job is a good idea and staying home and looking after the kids. Oh, what's your job? Well, I'm only a housewife. You know, that's what I heard for 50 years until recently is I'm a homemaker. That's a very recent invention in our culture. I'm a homemaker. What a difference that makes. A housewife and a homemaker. Like, wow, different phrases. So there's the moon, the homemaker. Now we can extend this beyond that baby needing the womb, sperm needing an egg, child needing a mummy to give food. So extend that to the adult needing an environment which is suitable for them to express creatively who they are. Now, once again, I didn't know what that would be like until I arrived in Ireland, because England didn't contain me. It didn't want me. Ireland is just like, yeah, you're the same as us. You're fine. Just look after your garden, pay your money, talk when we meet you in the street for 20 minutes. You're all right. You can stay. Fine. So I've got that home in my country, and I've built the same energy in my house as well. And because I have this sense of being not wrong, I feel I belong here, I can relax in a different way. And because I'm relaxed in a different way, I can take time and consult my feelings before speech, before action. Now, this whole idea of consulting your feelings before speaking is not really understood very well in cities. In cities, they have the idea like, well, come on, get on with it. Especially the worst example of moon energy is New York. You know, you're not given a moment spare time. You know, it's fast, it's aggressive, no new moon energy. Whereas if you go into anywhere in the country where the pace of life is slow and everything's green, people just enjoy spending time with people. And we've got that sense of the moon being the people. If you think about olden days when you did the horoscope of a country, you'd have the king being the sun, and the people would be the moon. And you'd have priestly classes being Jupiter, the warrior classes being Mars, and so on. And the tradesman, the craftsman who did something clever and sold it for money, Venus, making friends at the marketplace to do that. And the real tradesmen that bought and sold and moved around, the gypsies and the tinkers, that'd be Mercury. You know, so you've got all these equivalents. So the moon is the general population. In other words, we're not looking for individual expression. We're looking for the collective mood of a group, the atmosphere of a situation. It's intangible. And we find that when you look at an individual when you put aside the individual and you look at people as a whole, which is what we're discussing here, you have this collective motion, which is quite different from the individual motion. And I will give you an example of the tides. The tides, of course, are very lunar, very moon-like. They go up and down every 6 hours, and they get bigger up and bigger down every 14 days, with an extreme of that every 6 months because of the equinox energy increasing the difference. So you've got this series of rhythms, all lunar. And yet within any one of those rhythms, there is an anarchistic principle. So even though you can predict it will be high tide at a certain time, you don't know exactly how high that tide will be, because that depends upon the wind for example. And so it's the same in nature, where you've got the rhythm of nature being moon-like. It's going to be spring after winter. But the particular day that spring arises, like the Mayflower blooms or something, that would change year in, year out. And that's the anarchist principle. And those two ideas of the mother principle in nature being rhythm, predictability, and the father principle, or the green man, we call it in Ireland and England, that's the anarchist principle. I'll do it my way. I'll make every snowflake different from every other one. There's no leaf exactly the same as any other leaf. So the combination of the sameness of rhythm on the one hand and the particularity of how that rhythm is turned into an event on the other, that gives us an idea of the interaction between the moon that has this underlying rhythm of change, accepting anything that comes. If you want to be a snowflake in May, that's okay. In August, if you like, it won't change the fact that I determine the seasons, you know? So that's the underlying certainty that we have, that when we wake up tomorrow, after the nighttime, there will be light, it will be daylight. And that is the deepest level of security that we need. If we didn't have that, if we didn't know that daytime followed night, summer followed spring, we would go mad eventually. We would not be able to continue to function. The mind cannot cope. If you have one moment different from the last one all of the time, so there was no continuity, you'd go insane. Literally, this is not metaphor. You'd go insane rather quickly. It is the moon, therefore, the matrix that holds us into the realm of sanity, reasonableness. Even though it's unconscious, we don't know that that's what's going on until we miss it. So when my grandmother died, I really missed her. I grieved for her in a way that I had never loved her in her lifetime, because my security blanket was gone. And that's typical of our relationships of the lunar level. You know, a mother and a daughter, they might be bickering for years on end until one of them leaves home, and then they'll miss each other, having not ever expressed the love that they feel for each other fully, because it's unconscious. So this is the moon. It's all about care, service, nesting, creating a home, clan involvement. If you're a stranger in a strange land, you're at risk. If you make an accommodation for the funny ways of strangers, they will make an accommodation for you. And if you serve that community, then that community will start to serve you, and you will become part of their tribe. This is recorded often in Native American history. You can not survive without your tribe, really. And even though today we try that, there's so much isolated energy in the cities of the day. It's actually species threatening. The fact that we moved away from living as clans and extended families and tribes and moved into this independence of city life and so on, this is very damaging for that inner sense of belonging, and we don't feel safe anymore. And when you don't feel safe, you buy a weapon, don't you? You know, I mean, when you got a weapon, you'll notice that the neighbour's got a bigger weapon than you, so you'll buy an even bigger weapon, and there we have World War III on its way. You know, that's because we actually created city states instead of staying in our smaller villages and so on, where we had intimacy with everyone that we saw. And if somebody came into town and they weren't local, they wouldn't be able to speak the same way as you. They'd have an accent, and they'd do different things with their gesticulations, and they just wouldn't be doing it right. So all that we have of recognition, of tone of voice, of accent, of mannerisms, all of those unconscious communications. This is all moon stuff as well. It's not Mercury, that's moon. The stuff that says, I belong here and I welcome you, that's moon. Or I reject you, that's not moon. You know, so that aspect of how you are in that way in your life is your moon energy, very likely. So belonging, basically. Where do we belong? Who belongs to us? Whom do we belong to? And on the deepest level, there isn't anything quite as profound as when you realize that you belong to Mother Earth. Every little part of your being, which is physical, was born of clay. It came up from the earth. We belong to the earth. And equally, this land belongs to us in that sense of I care for that which belongs to me, and I am cared for by that which I belong to. That sense of deep, intimate connection with Mother Earth is mirrored by our deep interconnection with the birth mother. You know, they're the same thing, really. So when we move into breakout rooms, I want you to discuss your relationship process with your mother. Tears, anger, rage, all of those things are permissible if that's what you have to express that relationship. So in other words, our deepest emotional process is very often, not every time, but very, very often, because of a dysfunctional aspect of our relationship with our mother. And to ask you whether or not you had such a relationship is completely irrelevant. I know that you did, and I know that because everyone does. So how you cope with the fact that your mother and you had a dysfunctional relationship, that's your moon energy. So think about that and how that translates into your life in your giving and receiving of care. So my mother, for example, wanted to get us fed, washed, and off to school so that she could go to enjoy her career. She didn't want to be a mummy, she wanted to be a career woman. And so I've grown up to not expect to be looked after by women. And I've got my own independence established. You know, so what might have been on the face of it a bit selfish of her turns out to be a very great empowerment for me in the end. So think about that equation where what your mother did or did not do in her nesting, in her caring relationship with you, how did that impact your own self-care, self-love, and your attitude to care for others? You know, so think about that relationship with mother. Also think about the deepest sense you have of sustainable belonging. So what do you belong to? What belongs to you? You know, I've got a mouse here and that belongs to me. I don't have any emotional attachment to it because if I walked away, then neither the mouse nor I would give a shit. Neither would even notice. However, I couldn't walk away from my garden. If I tried to walk away from my garden, it would scream to me, "Hey, you, come back, my hair needs cutting." There would be some call unconsciously. I couldn't do it. Since I've started doing a garden, I have never left home. I don't think I've spent one night away from my garden since I started loving it. You know, how strange is that? You know, and I lived on the road for 30 years. You know, I never slept in the same bed 2 nights in a row for weeks on end. And now I'm belonging here. Makes a difference. So deeper sense of sustainable belonging, and discuss in your mind the relationship within you between being and doing. And this isn't truth what I'm going to say now, but it's a food for thought. if your moon energy is absolutely perfect, then being is just total joy. You can be, you don't have to do anything. But if your moon energy is a bit under established within you, then you might spend your life doing things, perhaps to deal with that. So just look into that, see if whether being and doing and how they are within you has to do with whether or not you were appropriately well loved by your mother and father. I've spoken only about mother for obvious reasons, but the father also delivers moon energy very profoundly, of course, in a slightly different way. But your father is actually an aspect of your moon energy insofar as he was caring for you. That's the aspect of your father that's a carer.